It's still a great time to buy in terms of getting deals, but you do have to make sure that you're cash flowing at the interest rate you're able to get.
All right. So again, we're the Leverage Podcast. This is episode 87, and we're talking to Avery Carl. We're talking about unleashing the power of short-term rentals, investing, and she's going to provide us unique tips. So Avery, nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, of course. And Avery, and just give you a little bio. You are a short-term rental expert who started with one property and looks like turned into 205 in a matter of 5 years. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I looked at from your Instagram. And obviously, you've become a multimillionaire over a 3-year period, and you own all of your properties. We just talked about it before we started the podcast. You don't do rental arbitrage, which is another topic. You own it, which is amazing. And I'm very excited to talk to you. And by the way, guys, if you are listening to this podcast, go to Amazon.com and just buy her book. She's got a book, which is, what's the name of your book again? It's short-term rental, long-term wealth.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, go buy one. I'm actually doing it right now as we speak. I'm going to pick it up a copy. So go to Amazon.com and then buy the short-term rental, long-term wealth properties by Avery Carl. So, all right. So Avery, right when we started this, let's get straight into it. You are the CEO of the short-term shop, and your specialty is a short-term rental investing.
Right.
Yeah. So just to give us a little bit of inspiration to the audience, can you tell us how you started in short-term rental ventures, how it all started out, what the idea came from? Just tell us your story.
Yeah. So it started several years ago. My husband and I were moving to Nashville, Tennessee from New York City. We weren't real estate investors yet. And our real estate agent was really trying to get us to buy in this super fast appreciating hip area of Nashville called East Nashville. And she was telling us how much money people were making off the appreciation of their houses in short periods of time. And we're like, that sounds great, but we're moving from New York to Tennessee. We are tired of neighbors. So we want to buy something out in the country. So we did buy a house out in the country. And we kept thinking about, well, man, I mean, we've got a little bit of money left. So maybe we can buy one of these houses that she was talking about and just rent it out while, over the course of the years. And when our future kids need to go to college, we can just sell it and it will have appreciated enough that we'll be able to pay for their college instead of having to come out of pocket. And we thought we were these geniuses that nobody ever thought of this before. So we bought a house, rented it long-term. It actually was a great deal, a great property for a long-term. It cash flowed $1,000 over the mortgage every month. And at the time when I was not making much money at all, $1,000 a month was a lot of money. So when we got that first rent check, we were like, man, this is awesome. We need to build a business out of this. And then we actually started educating ourselves on the investment that we had just made rather than educating ourselves before we made the investment. And reading all the books, listening to all the podcasts out there. And we said, okay, well, we've got a little bit of money left. We've got just like one down payment for one single family home left. So what can we buy that's going to make us the most amount of money the fastest so that we can go buy more faster? And we landed on short-term rentals. We knew we did not want to do it in Nashville because the regulations in Nashville just are constantly changing. They're very, they're very anti-short-term rental in Nashville. So we said, well, we can't afford to buy something and then the city changed the rules on us. So let's buy something somewhere where that's not an issue. So we landed on the Smoky Mountains. We landed on the Smoky Mountains in East Tennessee. We had just been there a few weeks prior and we stayed in a cabin when we went there and everybody else was staying in cabins too. And we said, well, everybody stays overnight in cabins in the Smokies. Somebody owns these cabins. Let's start here. So long story short, we figured out a way to manage them remotely without having to hire a property management company. At the time, they were running.
That probably saved you about 15 to 20%.
Well, at the time, it was 40% was normal.
Oh, wow.
That was this. Yeah, this was like before Vacasa was big. This was before Evolve was big. So those local guys were charging 40% of your gross. So that wasn't an option for us because that would suck all the cash flow out of the deal. It would probably actually make us lose money. So there weren't all these great programs and education tools and courses back then. So we just kind of figured out as we went how to manage one of those properties remotely, scaled that one into 5 short-term rentals in the Smokies over the next 18 months. And now 5 years later, we've got about 250 doors. They're not all short-term rentals. I'm not one of those people that thinks that short-term rentals are the right and only way, and that's all you should ever buy. I'm a big believer in having a diverse portfolio.
You're gonna have to diversify a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So our strategy has been to use all that cash flow from the short terms, and we're still buying short terms. We have eight of our 250 doors are short terms. If there's a place that we or like a deal that pops up, we'll buy it. But our strategy is to use the income from short terms to go buy apartment buildings and single family long terms.
Got it. So, I mean, that's probably the good way to do it, because if you're running a short term, all of them, that's a lot of work. And I cannot imagine you doing it all yourself. You got to have a good team behind it, because I personally own 3 short term rentals in Florida and South Florida area. And even though we live in Seattle, so, I mean, we come here only during the winter, but still, I mean, managing all of that. And so that's a lot of work, especially like with the handyman, with the cleaning crew, stuff comes out, something happens, neighbors complain, the deal. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I like how you started that. Yeah. I like how you started out just looking for passive income. Then you kind of saw an opportunity and zeroed in on growing your investments. So now there are a lot of people listening to us right now and who are interested in dipping their toes in the short-term rentals. Could you tell us what do you think about the benefits of short-term rentals and why it's easier to scale, you think?
Well, it's easier to scale because they cash flow much heavier than traditional long-term. So it would take longer to save enough money to be able to scale if you were starting with traditional long-terms.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's true. And there are obviously a lot of cons to it. I mean, sometimes, the vacancy, you're not going to be 100%, occupied all the time. So the vacancy is another aspect of that. So, but I think that kind of still outweighs, the lucrative nature of that still outweighs the vacancy rate, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of have to look at it from an annual standpoint and not a monthly standpoint. So, for example, I own a beach house in Destin, Florida that is only booked between March and spring break through like the end of October. And that scares a lot of people when they're only looking at the occupancy rate, but it makes so much money between March and the end of October that it makes all the money that I need it to make. I don't need it to be booked in the off season. So I think being afraid of seasonality is a mistake that a lot of new short-term rental investors make. Because vacancy and long-term rental is a bad, scary thing. But when it comes to short terms, a lot of seasonal destinations actually do make a lot of sense when you're looking at it from an annual standpoint. But when you're looking at it from a monthly standpoint, it kind of doesn't, because, in like November, you're not going to be booked. So you just kind of have to look at it on an annual basis.
Yeah. Avery, what do you think? What factors do you think people should be considering if they're planning to invest in short-term real estate? And when somebody wants to buy, let's say, a house, and let's say the house here in South Florida or like Destin, Florida, or anywhere else, what factors should they be considering when they're thinking of doing that?
Well, the number one thing is regulations. So you want to make sure that you're buying in a market where the regulations are favorable. So for example, that's why we didn't buy in Nashville, but we own now in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee. So that's like Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge area, Destin, Florida, 30A, Florida, and Cape Sandblast, Florida. And all of those areas are mature vacation rental markets. So those are areas where the majority of the tourism coming in has always stayed in short-term rentals, not a lot of hotel presence. It's not a new thing as of the past 10 years for people to start staying in short-term rentals. These are areas where people have been staying in short-term rentals since like the 30s. So the short-term rental business in these areas predates Airbnb and the internet. So because of that, those regulation battles were fought decades ago. Things are how they are. Everything's kind of settled in. So I try to focus on those mature vacation rental markets. And I think that that's wise as, just being able to buy a house down the street from you and just turn it into a short-term rental, just because those days are kind of gone. Cities and
Kinda gone,
counties,
yeah.
especially, yeah, especially in areas where there's a lot of industry outside of tourism. So a lot of jobs and primary homeowners whose income does not depend on tourism. Those guys don't want you opening up a short-term rental next to them. And I mean, I don't blame them. I don't want one next to
Oh, yeah,
me. And
of course.
that's my
I don't
primary
want
form
one
of
either.
income.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Mm.
you want to focus on those types of areas that have really favorable regulations.
Got it. Got it. Well, I mean, the good example right now, I mean, I was thinking of buying in Sunny Isles, Florida, which has a very heavy regulations. So I kind of like, backtracked and I bought here in the Broward County because Broward County has less regulations for short-term rentals and still very close proximity to Miami. And, obviously the ocean is only a couple minutes from here. So that's kind of, I understand. Yeah. So do you think like the emotional readiness come into play once for the rookie investors and like what should they be emotionally ready for that? Or what should they think about the budget, location? There's a lot of things come into play, not just only what you're gonna get per night at a place in regulations. It has to be like, obviously if you take a mortgage right now at this current rate, which is going to be, ridiculous, obviously, but I mean, let me just probably ask you another question. Are you still buying right now in this market? That's my question.
Yes. Yes.
You
So
are?
I am still buying. Yeah. The
Okay.
reason being because since everybody is so worried about the sky falling, there are a
Yeah.
lot more deals out there. Yes, the interest rate is higher, so you have to make sure that everything works, but since there's so much less competition in the market than there was last year, you're able to get a lot better deal on the purchase price of properties, so much so that it can kind of like wipe out that extra interest charge. So you just kind of have to run your numbers. The interest rates are what they are. They're just an expense. They're just a line item, just like anything else. And if you
Yeah.
just make
Cost of
sure
doing
that
business.
yeah. If you just make sure that your numbers work at the interest rate that you're able to get the deal for, then you're in good shape. So, just like anytime, you want to make sure that like last year, the interest rates were really low, but there were tons and tons of people buying properties. So you had to go way over asking to win a property. It's just like
Exactly.
that. It's the exact same thing. You had to make sure that the property worked at the price you were able to win for. Now you don't have to worry about winning so much. You just have to make sure that it works at the price or at the interest rate you're able to get for it.
I like that. I like that. It's a very, very data-driven strategy that you have. Because again, it's if the money makes sense, it makes sense. If you look at the prices, if the price makes sense, because you only care about the payment, what your payments are going to be, and if you're obviously you're cash flowing, you have to be cash flowing. So I mean, are you when you buying properties, are you buying in areas where they're more likely to appreciate, or I mean, you're only concerned about the cash flow? Because me personally, I like both. I like appreciation and cash flow. It's kind of hard to find in those areas. Sometimes where cash flow is bigger, appreciation may not be that much. So, what's your strategy?
I mean, ideally in a perfect world, we'd all like to have both, but I
Yeah.
like to focus on cash flow first, just because appreciation can change in an instant, whereas cash flow, it can change, but it can take longer for it to change. So, one major economic event can send us into a recession and you lose equity. So I like to have both, but I do slightly prioritize cash flow, especially in the beginning. If you're a brand new investor, you kind of have to prioritize cash flow just to get yourself to the point of being able to be more flexible with your decisions. So I'm going to say cash flow just for that reason.
Got it. Thank you. I mean, that's a very good point. I mean, people got to be considering what's coming in right now, not what you're gonna get when you sell the property. You may never
Right.
sell it. Who knows? I have actually spoke with a couple of Airbnb investors here in the area, and a lot of people are just actually complaining that it's kind of like slowing down a little bit. Maybe it's seasonality, but maybe I think it's people started to travel less than last year. What do you think of that?
Yeah. So it's all very market specific. And I think there's a number of things here. So, um,
Recession?
Yeah, there's that for sure. There's the fact that in 2021 there was so much travel that you could buy, a porta-john and throw it on Airbnb and not pay any attention to it and make money. And now that things are kind of
Yeah.
leveling out and going back to normal, people who invested in the past year and a half who aren't used to a normal short-term rental market are like, oh crap, I've got to pay attention to this. I have to manage this. This isn't cool. And they're realizing that it's not just that easy of just slapping something up there with terrible pictures and not paying attention. You do
Oh,
have to manage it. So I think there's a little bit of everything. And then people also have to understand, like, even if you own 1,000 doors and you own them for 50 years, you're only going to have one best year ever.
of
And that's it.
course.
Not
Of
every year is going to be your best year. So I think a lot of people whose best year was 2021 and now things are leveling back out, they act like the sky is falling. But when you think about it, like, I mean, you're only going to have one best year in any asset class, only one, no matter how many years
Yeah.
you own it. So, you just have to get okay with that. For us, I think we only dropped about 3% in our income for this year across all 8 of ours. So we didn't see too much of a problem. I think people that saw problems were the ones who were half-assing it, and then the people who might be brand new to the platform who weren't necessarily half-assing it, but don't have a lot of reviews yet. So I think that things will start to even out. I don't think it's going to go down too terribly much more, but there's definitely a few different factors at play contributing to that.
That's true. And I think like if you own only one property versus like you own like 3, 4, 5, obviously it's going to be different because in one property, you only looking at your property and say, oh, I have vacancy, I'm losing money. Where if you own several, like let's say one property actually cash flows, the other one, not so much. So it still kind of levels out that you come on top on all of those investments that you have. So you got to look from the perspective of that. So, and I looked at your Instagram, Avery, and you mentioned that you can actually manage properties from anywhere in the world. You can be anywhere. And because a lot of people think, oh, why should I be investing, let's say, in Arizona when I live in Memphis, Tennessee?
Yeah.
So anybody, let's say, who lives in Memphis, Tennessee, can own properties across the country and manage them from anywhere, or from Bali, or
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
how do you do
basically
that?
anywhere.
So
Oh,
why don't you talk
yeah.
to me
So
about it? Yeah, how do you do that?
yeah, so it's really not that difficult. You just need a few tools. So not everybody can live in the best place to invest for short-term rentals. So
Right.
Memphis, for example, not a great place to own short-term rentals, can be a great place for long-terms. My sister actually lives there. So sometimes no matter what asset class you're looking at, you might, like if you live in the Bay Area, that's really expensive real estate, really difficult to
Yeah.
cash flow in anything. So sometimes you do have to go out of state. And you really just need a few things. So you need 2 key people. You need a good cleaner and a good handy person. And then in terms of tools that you need a good property management software. There are tons of them out there. We use Hospitable. You need a good pricing software. There's 3 or 4 of them out there, not as many as there are property management softwares. We use Price Labs is our favorite.
Yep.
And then you just need all the apps installed on your phone. So Airbnb, Verbo, Price Labs, and
Yeah.
Hospitable, or whatever you use, installed on your phone, brings it all into one place. And it can be like a little bit to deal with to kind of get all that set up. That's kind of why I started the short-term shop. So when we were probably on our second short-term rental purchase, we realized there weren't really any agents in the space that at least that we were using or knew that could really answer our basic questions about like, hey, how do I set this up? Or how much do you think this will make? Or like, how do I find a cleaner? Nobody knew that. So I got my real estate license and started what would eventually become the short-term shop. And we now have 65 agents in 15 short-term rental markets across the country. And that's kind of what
Wow.
we specialize in. So we help all of our clients, obviously, choose the right property, buy that property, and then we teach them how to manage it for free, just for using us as their agents. So we help them get
Yeah.
all that stuff set up. So by the time the closing date rolls around, they've got all their software set up, they've got their people set up, and they're ready to go.
So you basically give them a plug and play model, kind of a setup for running their Airbnb business, right?
Yes,
The short
basically.
rental. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing. This is massive value you guys adding
you.
to people. I love that. So looking at managing that many properties, it seems like for short-term rental properties, it's hard enough. But do you have a big team of who's helping you do that? Do you have virtual assistants who do that, or somebody who's actually working behind the scenes? Let's say.
Yeah. Yeah. So for
Yeah.
our properties, all of our long-term rentals, so 242 properties we have with property managers. So
Okay.
long-term rentals, I'm totally cool. Like I love property
So you're hands
managers
off,
for
right?
long-term. Yeah, hands off for that. And
Okay.
then our short term, so the 8 of those, my husband does all the management of that. So I run the short term shop, like the front end of things, and he runs all of our investments and acquisitions and our personal portfolio. So he's
Okay.
doing all that stuff. And then he does have a VA from 9 to 5 Eastern time that helps answer some of the questions and run the short term rentals during the business week. That's only about, I would say, less than a quarter of that VA's job description is running the short-term rentals. So it's not even
Yeah.
a full-time job for the VA, but we do have VAs for various,
Got it.
like, I think we've got 5 of them between the 2 of us.
Well, I mean, we have some VAs actually who are managing short-term rentals from the perspective of answering clients, clients' inquiries, people who are, or any kind of sometimes guests. I mean, let's say I'm not available. I'm not always glued to my phone, but let's say client has an issue, the guest has an issue, sends an inquiry. A VA can actually respond, communicate it to the on-site manager or to the handyman if anything breaks. So at least that part is handled, which is a good thing. Also some VA addresses all kinds of concerns that can come in, and if anything requires immediate attention, then obviously we can jump in and do that. So that's what we do. Yeah. Look, Avery, this is really, really cool what you're doing. I really love your short-term shop. I checked it out on Instagram. It's a lot of value, and you're running a podcast, seems like, right?
Yep, short-term show.
Yeah. So, as just another question, just to wrap it up,
Okay.
as an expert in short-term rentals, what trends are you seeing in the short-term rental market right now? And what advice would you give to an investor who are trying to navigate the current market and trying to, let's say, those who are currently in this market and those who will be getting into this market? So like 3 questions. I'm sorry, not 1, but 3
Okay.
questions. Yeah.
So advice for those getting into the market, I would say choosing the right market is key. The market is almost more important than the property itself. So you want to choose a market that is both accessible and affordable. So like if you're buying something in Hawaii, you kind of have to understand that that's a very expensive vacation for most people to get to. And in a down, yeah, and bad regulations. So, you obviously want to make sure the regulations are what they need to be. But if it's a big, expensive vacation like Hawaii or Jackson Hole, you have to understand that in a downturn, those are going to be ones that kind of are hit the hardest. So regional drivable works really well. If you're going to buy in a metro market, you want to make sure that it's going to be able to work as a long term if it gets regulated out of being a short term, because metro markets are the worst for anti-short term rental regulations. So if you choose to buy in a metro market, just understand that. And in any market, you don't have to spend a ton of money to make yourself stand out in terms of decor. You just want to make sure that you're providing a cute, nice place to stay, that your pictures are professional. Don't use your iPhone. And that it looks, you want it to look professionally done, but there are ways to do that without spending tons and tons of money.
How do you handle, sorry, still can't get enough of you. How do you handle guests who are, let's say, not so accurate and not so delicate with your stuff, to put it in mild terms? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So you want to ask questions up front when they're booking. They'll usually, the ones who are going to be difficult will tell on themselves. We have not had any major like parties or anything like that. We've had people break something, but not in a truly, I would say, like malicious way.
Don't rent
Like
teenagers. exactly.
Yeah. We haven't had any ragers thrown at any of ours. And I think that's because we kind of ask questions up front and filter those people out, because they'll tell you, they'll say, hey, I
Yeah,
see you have a 6-person maximum, but can I bring 20? We're just going to be there for one night, so it'll be totally chill. And you're like, no, thank you. You're not going to be comfortable. Go, find some. You don't ever say, no, we don't want to host you because you're going to throw a party. You say, oh, you know what? I don't think you're going to be comfortable. You make it about them and their comfort,
good,
and they'll go find
good
somewhere
point.
else.
Yes,
Yeah.
good point. Yes, it's about them. The property may not be that comfortable for you, yeah.
Right.
That's good. That's good, because that's a major complaint, like a friend of mine had somebody staying at their house here in Fort Lauderdale, and somebody caught an iguana and drowned iguana in the pool. They
Oh my
drowned
gosh.
iguana in the pool. Yeah, he found a dead iguana in the pool, so he had to drain the whole thing. That's nasty. So
Yeah.
yeah, and again, sometimes you obviously have to look through that. So do you still think it's a good time for people to get into this market while in the short-term rental market while the interest rate is still high? Do you still think that people should keep buying?
Yeah, you have to make sure that it works. There's a lot of people out there that are giving really bad advice saying, marry the house, date the rate, and they're encouraging people to just buy whatever and refinance it later when interest rates go down. But there's no guarantee that they're going to
No,
go down that far. So you need to buy things. I think it's a great time to buy in terms of being able to get deals and get discounts and get good deals, but you can't bank on that the interest rate is going to be significantly lower later. It might be lower, but we don't know how much lower. I think the days of 3% are gone. I don't think we're going to ever see that again.
I don't
So
know, a long
I think
time.
that,
I don't think so.
yeah. So I think that it's still a great time to buy in terms of getting deals, but you do have to make sure that you're cash flowing at the interest rate you're able to get.
That's a good point. And again, this was Avery Carl. She's a short-term rental expert, and she's got a book on Amazon. Go check it out, by Avery Carl. And thank you very much for coming to this podcast. Appreciate it. We're the Leverage Podcast, talking about how you can leverage stuff, and Avery just discussed how she leverages, her time and resources by building a generational wealth. So that's amazing. And congratulations on your success, Avery.
Thank you. Thank you
Yes.
so much for having me.